Greetings, half a day. I am Logan Terrian, and today I'm going to be covering end user security with you. So, who is the end user? We all are. You are, I am, whether at home on your personal laptop or as an employee within an organization. These are things that will affect you, whether you're an IT professional or you know nothing other than how to open up Microsoft Outlook. I felt it was important to put the date on here because things change constantly, and you always have to keep up to date. So let's get started. So the why. What's in it for you? Primarily risk mitigation. All the stuff, all the information on your computer is always at risk. So we want to mitigate that risk and become a hard target. In order to mitigate that risk, you have to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and available. So confidentiality is primarily the path of no unauthorized user having access, and that'll be determined by your organization's policies. Integrity, ensuring that information can't be modified by unauthorized users, and availability, ensuring that the data can be accessed whenever you need it. So the bottom line is protect your information, and one day you might be in charge of my information, and you absolutely need to protect that as well. Topic learning objectives. At the end of this, we'll be able to describe end user threats, understand antivirus malware technologies, understand anti-phishing technologies, understand data loss prevention processes, understand sandboxing, and describe good password policies. We're not going to deep dive into this just based on time. Each one of these can be taught for days. So we'll just do a general overline of each one of them. References. There's so many references out there. You'll see the ones primarily that I utilize up here. And the bottom two are the most important. All the books and a world wide web of information. So there are about 2 million designs for the wheel out there. I'm also not big in recreating it. So I use these as a baseline for developing my policies and process. Bottom line though, keep up to date. The bad guys are constantly inventing new ways to mess up your day, which requires process and technologies to be updated continuously. All right, so end user threats. I can sum these up in about three. Social engineering, malicious code, poor policies. And policies are designed by people, and people are the ones that have to enforce these policies and live up to whatever standard that organization has. So training, I'm just going to throw that out there. Don't talk too much about it, but training is important. You could have all the tools in the world. You could have all the best policies in the world, but if people don't know them and don't follow them and don't understand the outcome for failure to follow those policies, everything will be for naught. So phishing, it's a process that involves planning, setting up, attacking, and collecting sensitive information with the bottom goal of identity theft and fraud. It's often associated with emails that mimic the structure, design, and behavior of another website, usually a bank, credit card company, or any business that requires personal information to fulfill its end task. However, the emailing is just the beginning of the phishing process. In short, phishing is a process that involves planning, setting up, attacking, collecting. So in the planning phase, the attacker or the phisher decides which business or company to target and develops a list of emails that business might use, often known as subscribers. At this point, the collection of the emails is similar to the lesser evil that is spam. So going on to the next phase, the setup phase, the phisher develops a way of methodology of delivering the fraudulent message in order to most efficiently collect a user's data. In large part, this involves setting up the email address and the web page, both of which mimic the targeted business. And this is easily set up. If you ever have any experience with Kali, which is a newer version of Backtrack, there's a social engineering toolkit on there, and this is just so easy to do. Someone with any computer knowledge can go in there, do a little internet search, and figure out how to use it probably within 5 minutes, and just be able to attack you right off the start. So the attacking phase, the phisher sends the message, making it look as reputable as possible in order to sway the user into giving personal information. Next, the collection phase, the attacker will record the information, which is being entered into those fake websites, and collect it for personal use. At this point, the user has already become a victim to the phishing attack because the information is out there. The final phase, what the attacker decides to do with that information, it depends. Some may involve a simple purchase or transaction. The heavier, more serious cases will involve a deeper identity theft and fraud. So what anti-phishing technologies are out there? There's software and hardware means available. Primarily it uses IP filtering to detect lookalike domains, and that's a database of what the good domains are compared to what the bad domains are, and it'll see, for instance, if you're looking for bestbuy.com, maybe a lookalike domain is bestbuy1.com or .net. And these domains, the attacker can look them up on whois.com and figure out what's available, what internet sites, internet domains are available that are very similar to what he's trying to get you to go for, bank website, and you may not know. So malicious code, we should all be familiar with malicious code. The internet's been around long enough, but just a quick summary. Malicious code: viruses, Trojan horses, worms, logic bombs, rootkits, viruses attached to other programs or files, and will copy itself in a host or spread to another network host. Worms are pieces of malicious code that make copies of itself, very hard to get out of your computer once it gets in. Trojan horses, they will hide safely within other programs. They're very well hidden, and unless you understand all the scripting within that, you'll never find it. Most likely to give remote access to the attacker from that target. So once one of computers affected, it's possibly a gateway to the rest of the network. You've just done some bad things there and gave access to all the bad guys. Can be used in the form of scripted languages, ActiveX controls, browser plugins, Java applets. Some of the technologies out there to mitigate this risk are antivirus software, which goal is to prevent, detect, and remove malicious code. Some examples of these are Norton, Symantec, Avira. Firewalls are useful, intrusion prevention systems as well. So the way the antivirus software works, it's signature based, right? So it's time late is really the bottom line on that, and there's not much you can do about it. Once the virus is discovered, antivirus company will identify a signature that is associated with that virus and add it to an antivirus database. And that's why it's important that you update your antivirus software and your computer continuously. Whenever it says update, press the OK button. So the issue again with that is always it's a step behind the bad guy. Firewalls filter traffic to and from a host. Some ways packet filtering. It looks at a packet to determine if it should be allowed, dropped, or rejected. Stateful filters. It holds the packet until a decision is made about its state. And that operates at the transport level, the transport layer. Some risk associated with that is denial of service attack. If it continues holding the packets until it makes a decision, you can just keep on throwing packets at it, and then it eventually will freeze up or not be able to get anything through it. Intrusion protection system analyzes domain names, domain name system DNS, file transfer protocols FTP, and hypertext transfer protocols HTTP, and determines if an application is trying to bypass the firewall on an open port. That operates at the application layer. Password protection. This is really policy driven within the organization or within your personal use. It's something that you have complete control over and becoming the hard target for the attacker. So things that you should have within your organizational policy are control of history. I've seen where you can't use passwords that have been used over the last 16 times. So if your password has been disclosed, you don't want to give the bad guy access to something that he doesn't currently have. Age, again, a good policy is change your password, every 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, every quarter. So if he does have access, they don't have it very long. Length, something within the organization I'm at, it can't be less than 16 characters, and it just takes longer to crack. Complexity. Why is complexity important? Well, when you're cracking a password, you can, let's say your password's encrypted once you use it. If that password's taken, the bad guy can take a dictionary, encrypt the dictionary, and then compare those encryptions together and come up with your password. So you'll see two examples on the right side. The good password, 16 characters, 2 capitals, 2 numbers, 2 symbols. Find a dictionary word that looks anything similar to that. You probably won't. But the bad one, pretty unicorn, very simple, 2 dictionary words just put together, and I don't suspect that would take very long to crack it all. So let me just say something here. This is really policy driven. People are the weakest link in any security organization. We just try to find the easiest way of doing things sometimes, and all of us have been affected by having 42 passwords. And if you go by the 16 characters, different symbols, numbers, capital letters, it's just hard to remember. So eventually you write it down. If you ever are afforded the opportunity to get back to the same password or use the same password on every platform you try to access, you're most likely to do that, just because it's human nature to not make your own life harder. But it's important that your organization has a policy to enforce these rules. Failure to do so will not mitigate the risks that are out there. Okay, so some other functions that are available for applications. One includes sandboxing. So it's a security method to run applications separately from each other. It isolates memory allocation, it isolates network access, and system space. So what this does really is prevents applications from using the same space. It isolates it. If you think of a kid in the sandbox, another kid gets a sandbox. The sandbox don't interact. All the toys stay separately. Some vulnerabilities that happened last year that this could have prevented were Spectre and Meltdown. It was used to get a hold of data stored in the memory of other running applications. That was a huge Microsoft and Macintosh security patch that went out earlier this year to prevent that from happening again. But that gives access for passwords, store the password manager or browser, your personal photos, emails, instant messages, and sensitive information. Data loss prevention, again, really organizational, policy driven. Tools and processes designed to ensure that sensitive data is not lost, misused, or accessed by unauthorized users. Software utilized, classifies regulated, confidential, and business critical data, identifies violations of policies defined by organizations or within a predefined policy, typically driven by regulatory compliance such as HIPAA or PCI DSS. Once those issues or violations are identified, your data loss prevention enforces remediation with alerts, encryption, and other protective actions to prevent the end users from accidentally or maliciously sharing data that could put the organization at risk. Some of the data loss prevention guidance out there is HITECH Act, the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health, the HIPAA Act, and the PCI DSS guidance standards. I think it's important to note that the top two are government regulated, while PCI DSS is industry regulated. They figured if they regulate themselves, the government can stay out of the business. But the bottom line for all of these standards and regulations are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We've covered end-user threats, antivirus malware technologies, anti-phishing technologies, data loss prevention processes, sandbox techniques, and password policies. Bottom line, at the end of the day, there's a lot of bad guys out there and a lot of sensitive information. And it's not going to get any less. The more technologies we create, we're trying to become a flat world where all the processes happen and you have access to everything at any time. So it's important for you personally and within your organization to create policies, processes, evaluate which tools you can use to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data that exist. All right, thank you for your time.